Hello and welcome to Fireside Grace. I am your host, Robin Cunningham, obviously with Fireside Grace Ministries. I am very glad to be here. I understand that it's very late right now. It's 10:11 p.m. right now where I'm at. So if you're in some place that does military time, it's 2011 right now. So it's late for me. I'd prefer to be in bed like a half an hour ago, but somebody asked me a question not very long ago, probably today or yesterday, actually, if I would go over the Tower of Babel, excuse me, and Nimrod a little bit in a little bit more detail. And the answer to that is yes. I know it's late, so I'm like not expecting really anybody to sign on here. But I'm glad to see you guys. First of all, if you would like to partner with us, you can do so at firesidegrace.com/partner with us right down there at the bottom, or you can find us on Venmo, PayPal's Reformers Church, just as you see it there, or our mailing address is 2145 North Josie Lane, Suite 116-501, Carrollton, Texas. Okay, so there's that. All right, I am going to switch from my camera to a folder, and you tell me if you can still see the video rolling, okay? Just so I know, okay? Can you still see the video rolling? Can you still see my face and everything, or is it like gone? So was it still there? Just let me know real quick because I don't want to I'd have to figure out how to teach this without switching back and forth between screens. Don't you all respond at once now? Did I cut off? It was still there? Okay. So, we're going to talk about Nimrod, the hidden technology that's in the Bible, and what was going on at the time of the rebellion. And I'll try and make this not too long because it's late. I've got to help Brandy clean up. We have company coming this weekend and so forth. So here's what we're going to do. Let's get into, I'm actually writing this in a book that I'm writing that's called, for now, it's called Exposing Demons. I've been working on it for about 4 or 5 hours. I've got about 20 pages in. I've actually written the book before, but I learned a lot more since I wrote that book, and I'm having to change a lot. So we took that down off of the website probably a year ago or more, and I've had to change a lot because I've learned more, seen more things, gathered more things, and so forth. So one of the questions we get asked a lot is, why were there hybrids again on the earth if there was all of the dinosaurs were killed and everybody was killed? How did they resurface? How did they start to show up again? And a lot of people think that that's because the Nephilim were coming and having sex with the humans, with females, and creating these hybrid offsprings. And that's not true. The Nephilim cannot have children. There's not one time in the Bible where it says an angel ever had a child. There's also not one time in the Bible where an angel is ever called a son of God. In fact, it says in the Bible, and I believe it's in, but Paul said it. He said, "To which of the angels did the Lord ever say, 'You are my son, today I have begotten you'?" He didn't say that. In fact, he said, "Let all of the angels worship Jesus." He said all of the angels are ministering spirits, but they are not sons of God. The ones that are sons of God are the people, the human beings. It's a title reserved strictly for human beings. Those are the sons of God. Okay, I know people are like, "How dare you say that? It clearly says this in the Bible." Well, you're wrong. And if you want to get into it, I can do a 10-hour teaching about all the stuff that I've learned, but I won't go there right now. Okay, but the sons of God are Adam. And look, you can even see, and I believe it's in Luke 3:38, where it's going through the genealogy of Jesus all the way down to Adam, and it calls Adam the son of God. It says Adam Benecha Elohim, if that were written in Aramaic, but it's written in Greek. But what he says is Adam the son of God. So the sons of God were people who were doing the will of God at the time after the fall. And people think, well, the human race was not doing anything good. It's very clear in Genesis 6. It says they were only thinking about evil all the time. Well, in Genesis 4, Cain and Abel were making sacrifices to the Lord. And Cain's sacrifice was not accepted, and Abel's sacrifice was accepted. If they didn't know anything about God or the will of God, then how would they have known to sacrifice to the Lord. Also, I'd like to point out, people like to think that, in the end of the chapter, and in chapter 4:25 of Genesis, that it says for 238 years that man didn't talk to God for 238 years. It doesn't actually say that. What it actually says was at that time they began to profane, halal, the image or renown of God. The name, the word Shem in Hebrew does not just mean the name. It means the image, name, mark, the mark, or the renown. It means the same thing in Greek, onomos. It means image, renown, mark, or character, which we get the word character from the Greek word character. And so we also see how it says halal means to bore or to pierce, as in to cut with a knife or cut with a sword. So when you're receiving the mark of the beast, you have to receive the mark. The word it uses is chargama. Chargama is a word that means to engrave or to cut into something, to dig into something, and to shape it so that it looks like the image that you want it to look like. So you literally get shaped into the image that you're trying to form. Now, we see this. I will go into that another time, but what I want to get into here is Nimrod and what was going on in the days of the flood. I lost a lot of people because you can't stand what I'm talking about, because I have the scriptures. I have the scriptures to back it up. But people don't want to hear it because it defies what you've been taught in the church, and it's wrong teaching that's been taught in the church. All right, so the first thing I have to establish about the post-flood hybrids and what was going on in the days of Nimrod is the timeline of the days of Noah. Now, you may recall that Jesus says, as it was in the days of Noah, so it shall be, in the time to come. That is not just talking about in the days of the flood. That is talking about the days after the flood also, because Noah was still alive when Abraham was born. So approximately 140 years after the flood, Noah was still alive. Isn't that awesome? So that's part of what Jesus is talking about in the days of Noah. It's not just that everyone's evil, everyone's heart was turned awry or whatever, but that was the time. I believe that's the more specific time frame that God was talking about. Okay, so Noah was also alive during Nimrod's reign, and he was actually Nimrod's great-grandfather. So when Jesus says in the days of Noah, it's not just referring to pre-deluge era, but it's referring to Nimrod and Abraham's time simultaneously, okay? Now, I did an interview with Ivan Tuttle a while ago, and one of the things that he shared with me was that while he was in heaven, he got to go back to the beginning and saw all of this that was going on with Nimrod as well. And he said in just 120 years after the flood, they have developed their technology so much, to such a great extent and such a great capacity, that they were traveling into space and going far beyond where we had gone. They had all kinds of technology beyond what we can imagine. And people say, well, that's crazy. That couldn't happen. That's stupid. Prove it. I can and will show you the proof of that. I will. Just give me a little bit of time. But I was like, this gets my gears thinking. Listen, people think that that's insane, that in 120 years they could come up with such technology, but where's that technology now, and why'd they get sent back into the Stone Age? What he said was when God came and confounded everybody's tongues and scattered the world, he broke the continents into pieces, he confounded everybody's tongues. It was so severe that even the person next to them, they couldn't understand what they were saying. Man, woman, child, nobody had the same language anymore. They had to come together. They had to learn how to speak and communicate to each other. And only certain beings, only certain people retained the old language, or it's a demonic tongue. They speak in a demonic tongue now, but they only had one language at the time. The language that they had become corrupted because it was through a couple thousand years of speaking it. After 2,000 years, a language starts to evolve, but it was originally the language of heaven. That was the only language that was spoken, was the language of heaven. Can you imagine that? That's like having direct access to the heavenly realms all the time, You're speaking and flowing in a heavenly tongue all of the time. That was the only language that existed. That language wasn't Hebrew, by the way. I'm sorry. I want to believe that it was Hebrew, but it wasn't. Hebrew came after, because you can literally see when the languages started to disperse about 4,200 years ago. There's even accountings of in the days of Nimrod where he defied God so much that it says there was a great drought and then a great shaking, and Nimrod was destroyed by the gods themselves. The actual legend goes that after Nimrod died, he became the god Baal, and then his son became Tammuz, and Tammuz married Ishtar, and then Tammuz died, and so the mourning of Tammuz is actually the mourning of Baal's son, and that's the mourning of Nimrod's son, who was a human who became a hybrid, who then became a god after they died. And the reason for that is, to get into it specifically, is I believe it's in 1 Corinthians, it says that each type of flesh has its own type of spirit. So an animal's flesh has an animal's spirit. A human's flesh has a human spirit. It's God's spirit, because in, I think it's, I want to say Ecclesiastes, I can't remember exactly which one, but it says that all spirits belong to God and they return to him. I just find that interesting. Okay, so anyway, going on. People say 120 years they could come up with that, and 120 years. God said, look, they're united with one language right now, and they have accomplished this. They can do anything. We have to stop this. I'm paraphrasing. He's like, we've got to stop this. They've done all of this in just this short period of time, in 120 years, with one language. We need to stop this right now. You think that's crazy. What were we doing 120 years ago? Now, this time it will be 1920. We actually had cars at this time. But let's say it's the year 2000 right now, right? So the year 1900. What were we doing from 1900 to 2022? We were still on horses in the 1900s. We were just coming up with electricity. We were just coming up with running water. And what happened in steam engines and motors and stuff like that in that little period of time? Then all of a sudden, we have radios, electricity in every house, plumbing in every house. We have machines of war. We can fly on airplanes. We've been to the moon. We have satellites. We're planning a trip to Mars. We have satellites that are traveling over 80,000 miles per second right now. In 120 years, we accomplished all of that, with all of us having a bunch of, I think it's over 180 different languages and dialects altogether. We could accomplish that in 120 years. Imagine what they could do, all united in one place with one language, with the fallen angels still there at that time, giving them secret information. Can you imagine that? What do you think they could have done in 120 years that we haven't accomplished in 120 years? You see what I'm saying? Like, we have such a small mind about this that we think that's so unreasonable, that's so far off, that doesn't make sense. But it really does. And now the evidence is there. Now, let me go, and I want to read to you what I've written, basically, so that I can get you thinking about these things. One of the things that I discovered as I did research about this, because I haven't had my brain just ticking, and if you haven't seen that interview, go watch it. It's a good interview. We cover a lot of things that you probably haven't heard before. Okay, so one of the things that I discovered was there's a bunch of ancient hieroglyphs in Egyptian tombs and Babylonian tombs, Mesopotamia, and in that area, in that region in the Middle East, where those ancient 4,200-year-old tombs and stuff are, where they have hieroglyphs of things that were going on. There's hieroglyphs of light bulbs, hieroglyphs of airplanes, hieroglyphs of things that appear to be a helicopter or a spacecraft. Okay? I also discovered that there are books called, there are Hindu texts called the Vimana, and there's called the Vedas and stuff like this. And in those books, these are from 4,200 years ago also, but they were written in 2500 BC. And what they outlined was brain surgery, modern medicine, machines that could fly using electromagnetic hydrogen-powered engines. And today, we just barely came up with a hydrogen ion engine as a propulsion system for a satellite in space that uses solar power, converts that, causes a hydrogen turbine to spin, which then creates thrust in space, which allows a spacecraft to move. Okay? These Hindu texts, they're called the Vimana. All right? Now, there was a guy in, I believe it was 1895, whose name was Skivar Palpade or something like that. He's an Indian guy. And he built an aircraft using a crude motor that they had available in 1895, but he built an aircraft that they said flew up to 1,500 feet, and I think for like a quarter of a mile or up to a mile, much further than the Wright brothers, who flew many years later, right? So that's 457.2 meters approximately before it came down. Now, the Indian government has said since then, this is a farce, this is made up, this never happened, all this other stuff. However, there were pictures that were printed in the newspapers before they tried to cover this up. And he said that he used mercury as a motor source, as a source for electricity to get that motor spinning in order to lift that machine up off of the ground. There's something to share with you there. I know you're thinking this is crazy. He's just one of these ancient alien nuts or whatever, but we'll get into that more later. But one thing that I've noticed also on doing research is that the evidence that these hybrids and humanity were in space is very clear, because it's written in the accounts of all of the peoples and their mythos. So every civilization has a myth about how some gods came down from the heavens and helped to start transform mankind. And one of those is Quetzalcoatl, Teotihuacan, and whatever the name is, the city of the sun, city of the moon, where they actually said the gods would come down and start to transform people into gods. So we see that this is what was going on in the time of Nimrod, all right? But listen, just trying to stay on track here. We'll get into it a little further. But every civilization has a humankind, about a myth about some kind of humankind coming down in some kind of spaceship. Even the Indians, the Hindus, they have their gods fly on spacecraft. If you look at some of the old pictures that they have from hundreds of years ago, or the stories that depict, they fly on these machines, and they have great weapons that could, like nuclear bombs and so forth. These are just things that the information is out there, and we're just not looking for it because we think, well, it's not in the Bible, but it's in the Bible. It's literally in the Bible, and then you just have to do some research, okay? So not everyone in that time had that technology. It was the Cushites who were evil, and they transformed some of the Semites and some of the other people around them, but mankind did retain a large portion of its humanity. Nimrod was not able to change everybody. That's part of the whole Antichrist scenario that will be happening in the future, okay? Now, the reason that I point all of this out is because it was around the same time that Nimrod was alive, and he was a wicked, evil king, okay? And there's a lot hidden between the lines concerning Nimrod. And according to Joseph, Nimrod was the one responsible for trying to unite the whole world together as one, and that he wanted to seal the buildings together with bitumen as an act of defiance against God in order to waterproof the buildings. And Josephus is quoted as saying that Nimrod said, "If he tries to flood us again, I will avenge him myself." The name Nimrod means to rebel. To rebel. He rebelled against God. He said, "I will avenge God myself," thinking that he was so powerful that he could go and slap God upside the head and say, "We're going to do what we want to do, so back off." Right? So there's a lot about Nimrod in the Bible that's actually hidden between the lines. All right. And I started to do some research on this because I was like, well, where is this? Like, they were building these bricks. Like, I started to research in Genesis 11:3. And it says, "Then they said to one another, 'Come, let us make bricks and bake them thoroughly.' They had brick for stone, and they had asphalt for mortar. Well, the asphalt is bitumen. That was what they used back then. Well, get this. I did a word study on this sentence, and I discovered that the word for bricks derives from the Hebrew word Laban, which means white. So they were making literally white bricks, and they were sealing them with bitumen. Now you think, well, they had a white brick, and then they would coat it in tar. No, they were using it as mortar. They were using it as mortar to seal in the cracks, anywhere that they had to seal in cracks so that water couldn't get in through the cracks, right? White stones. Well, then I was praying and I was like, Holy Spirit, how do I confirm this with actual evidence from the real world and from that time? Well, you have the Great Pyramids. The Great Pyramids were built at the same time. Mizraim is Egypt. Mizraim was born at the same time as Nimrod, so they were either brothers or they were very close relatives, cousins or uncles or something like that, but they were very close relatives to Nimrod. Mizraim is Egypt. Okay, Mizraim also means bandages. In case you were wondering, what does Mizraim mean? It means bandages. And what is Egypt known for? Bandaging their mummies, bandaging their dead, wrapping them up in linen cloth and mummifying their dead. Why? To preserve them for the afterlife. Why? Because they knew that when they died, their spirits weren't necessarily going to go to hell, but that is a topic for another time. They will go to hell, but they're another time. Don't let me get into that right now, okay? So what they were doing was the pyramids, when the pyramids were finished, and you can do the research yourself, when the pyramids were finished, they were white. And what was used as mortar was bitumen. The oldest known pyramid. White with bitumen as mortar. Isn't that something to think about? It was waterproofed. I find that very interesting. Okay. So we see in the genealogies of Ham, we learn that Egypt was born around that same time as Nimrod in the post-flood era, or the post-Diluvian era, most people will call it, approximately 4,200 years ago, which was around 25 to 2400 BC. And so in Seti's tomb, this is 1,000 years later, or maybe about 400 years later. I think it's about 1900 BC. In Seti's tomb, they discovered hieroglyphics of a helicopter and some sort of flying spacecraft. Several hundred years later in Seti's tomb. Guys, I'm not making this up. This is actually legitimately history that's spoken about in the Bible, that's evidenced for us to see in the history around us. And to be honest, I hate to say this because I'm sounding like I'm crazy, but you've been being lied to for real. Like, I don't believe the earth is flat. I know the earth is round. The Lord has taken me up and shown me that it's round. In the scriptures, whenever it says the earth was vaulted, it actually says the earth was round. It doesn't even say that it was vaulted. The words don't mean vaulted. It means it was round, like a circle, like a sphere. Okay, so he sits over the circle of the earth. And I don't believe that, but I do believe the Bible says that mankind has been on this earth in a fallen state for approximately 6,000 years. So the things that we have been taught about how this city, Gobekli, whatever it is, Tepe, or is 10,000 years old. So how do you account for that, this, that, and the other? You're being lied to. You're being lied to. End of story. How do I know this? You could say, well, the earth was around for millions of years or billions of years. Who knows how long the earth was around before mankind fell? Yeah, but bro, there was no deterioration. There was no death. There was no decay before the fall. So therefore, there would not be evidence of things from millions of years ago having died millions of years ago before there was ever death or decay or destruction. That stuff didn't start until after the fall, and that didn't start until approximately 6,000 years ago. So the whole theory of, we can carbon date this because carbon dating has a half-life of X amount of thousands of years, this, that, and the other, so we can date it back to 120 million years, that's mishigash. It's malarkey, bullcrap, for lack of a better word. because the earth, the universe, everything technically hasn't aged that long. I believe the Bible, 100% pure, true, every word of it. I believe it. I believe that is true and right and accurate. And so when you get that and you understand that, you can have this revelation. You can understand this revelation. You can call me crazy. You can say whatever you want to, but that won't change the fact that this happened. And one of these days, I'm going to go in here, take you all the way back up to the first 14 pages where I uncover the origin of demons, and it is not the Nephilim. It is not the sons of God, and it is not the daughters of Adam. It is actually the disembodied spirits of the hybrids. And in Genesis 6:4, it actually tells you they don't translate a word, but there's a word there called lehem, which means to rankle or to wound. And it comes from the word rancoli, and that is a derivative of a Latin word, which is the word dracon or dragon. So it literally says they begat lehem, the men of renown. It says they begat serpents unto them. This is something to think about. Then in Genesis 6:7, you can go look this up for yourself. God says, I will destroy the man and behemoth, and I will destroy the creatures that fly in the air and the creatures that crawl on the ground. And if you do the research of what they believe dinosaurs derived from, they think that all birds that we see today derive from dinosaurs. But if you look at this Genesis 6:7 with a different lens, you see that God was saying man and beast. He could be comparing that to hybrids, men and beast hybrids. And the creeping things is lizards, and the flying things are birds. So if you take a look at things like now they believe that a velociraptor did not look like a lizard, but it looked more like a lizard, but it had feathers on it like a bird, and it was winged. It was a bird-lizard hybrid. They have discovered that baby Tyrannosaurus rexes were born with feathers, and they have hollow bones like birds, and they could fly like alligators. They could swim like alligators. This is what they call evolution. This is what they call history. And they're trying to trick you. I have a whole lot more I could go into that, but I've spent a half an hour teaching you something that I might just delete and not leave it up here, but we'll see, because it makes me look like a crazy person. I might just put it on Rumble and not leave it on YouTube, so we'll see. All right, guys, that was a lot of information to throw at y'all at once. Thank you for being here this late at night. Thank you for all the compliments on the haircut and the beard trim. Appreciate you guys. Love you guys. Be blessed. And I will see you on Friday for our Handyman Hal interview. By the way, Handyman Hal is the new version of Blippi, which I think is a better version. The man who plays Handyman Hal is a pastor from North Carolina. He's a children's pastor. He's not super high energy and annoying and doesn't talk in a high-pitched voice all the time. And he actually does the work himself and gets out his tools and does work. He's only got like 65,000 subscribers right now, but he's relatively new channel. And this is going to be one that if you have kids, you're going to love it. You are going to love it because it's like a not weird Blippi that you can actually watch. Okay, that is all that I'm going to share with you now about the hybrids and all of that stuff. But I'm writing a book right now about it, rewriting a book that I've already written, but I'm rewriting it, and I'll get that published. So if I don't watch this, I'll leave it up for about an hour or so, and then I'll take it down and I'll just put it on Rumble, hidden at the bottom somewhere, because I just get a bunch of flack when I do stuff like this, because people, they come at me with their arguments, but they don't come at me with the scriptures to back up what they're saying, and I come at it with the scriptures to back up what I'm saying. And in fact, if I can't find it in the scriptures, I don't say it. And I don't agree with it until I find it in the scriptures. Even if I have a theory, I don't. So if you have something you would like to say, something you'd like to add, please bring me the scriptures. I will be more than willing to research it, look into it, see your point of view. I have learned a lot from people doing that. But don't be surprised or offended if I respond back with my own thoughts, because I'm trying to figure out the truth of the matter. And that is how you come to formulate a clear and concise opinion about something where you've looked at all of the angles. You can't just have an opinion or take what you've been taught. Didn't you learn anything from the Matrix? You have to look at it, research it, study it, pray about it. All right. Love you guys. Be blessed, and I will see you next time. Until then, bye.